No sooner had I transferred 100 billion fortune to my child than my child disowned me. All because he was the assistant brought in on the same day the child was born. I had poured my heart into raising the assistant's child, while my own child was abused by that assistant from infancy. After I handed over the 100 billion estate, the assistant claimed the babies had been swapped, produced a paternity test, and my child immediately had me committed to a psychiatric hospital, where I was tormented to death. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day I was due to give birth. This time, I switched the baby in advance. When I carried assistant Nina's child back, I was still trembling all over. I never could have imagined I would be reborn to the day my child was born. In my previous life, it was Nina who swapped my child away, making me raise her child Jasper with all my heart, while she abused my child from a young age. Just as I was about to transfer billions in assets to Jasper, Nina brought a paternity test, and Jasper refused to acknowledge me on the spot, even blaming me for separating him from his biological mother for so many years. My child, after prolonged abuse, developed schizophrenia, and Jasper had the two of us committed to a psychiatric hospital. My child and I endured unspeakable torment and died miserably. Staring at the infant sleeping in the swaddling, my eyes filled with hatred, my whole body trembling with anger. Such a heartless, treacherous thing, after all the care I gave him for over 20 years. Mrs. Arya. A hushed voice from outside called Nina, and I flinched, turning and lying back on the hospital bed with my eyes tightly shut. When there was no answer, Nina called again, and only then did she come in. Mrs. Arya. She called once more. I kept my eyes closed and motionless, then I heard Nina exhale, followed by the soft rustle of movement. After her footsteps receded, I opened my eyes. The baby I had held a moment ago had been swapped. I narrowed my eyes. Nina was a college graduate I had sponsored, eloquent and capable, and I had hired her into the company as soon as she graduated. Because she had nowhere to live, I let her stay at my house. Seeing that she was capable, I promoted her straight away to be my assistant. I personally guided her in everything. In just a few years, Nina mastered the ways of the workplace and was already able to handle partnership negotiations on her own. I never expected, though, that Nina would betray me so badly. In this life, I will make sure she eats the bitter fruit of her own deeds. Footsteps came from outside again. I drew a breath, smoothed the chill from my eyes, and my husband Tyson walked in. "Honey, I simmered some chicken soup." "Taste it," he said. He kept his gaze on the baby while he spoke, then a faint smile appeared. I lowered my eyes and drank the chicken soup. Hatred flared in my eyes once more. Nina dared to be so bold partly because of the handiwork of a good husband like me. It was only after I was sent to the mental hospital that I learned this pair of scoundrels had long been seeing each other. Nina's child was even Tyson's. To outsiders, Tyson was a good husband. Ever since I gave birth, he had voluntarily quit his job to stay home and take care of the child, managing everything in the household. Because of him I could concentrate on the company, and in just 5 years it went public. During that time, Tyson secretly took the child to meet Nina and cultivated their relationship. So when Nina revealed the truth, Jasper hesitated not at all and cut ties with me immediately. And my child was beaten and scolded by Nina from a young age, went hungry and cold, and was ultimately driven into schizophrenia. But my child is also Tyson's child. How could Tyson be so indifferent? "Wife." Seeing me lost in thought, Tyson called softly. I shook my head, signaling that I was fine. Only then did Tyson breathe a sigh of relief, carefully lifting the child, utterly delighted. I clutched the bowl tightly, suppressing the hatred in my heart. This time, Tyson and Nina would both pay a terrible price. As in her past life, whatever good things Nina had, she gave to Jasper. As for the child by her side, she named him Leo. She abused him every chance she got. I only smiled faintly at this. After all, he wasn't my child, so let Nina do with him as she pleased. I just wondered, if Nina knew the child she was tormenting was her own son, what would she do? 20 years passed in the blink of an eye. I sent Jasper abroad to study. As for Leo, he never even set foot on a school campus. He followed Nina around all day like a dog, timid and submissive. Whenever Nina was displeased, he would shrink into a corner, not daring to breathe. His body was mottled with bruises, blue in places and purple in others. Nina looked at me and smiled. "Mrs. Arya, Jasper will be returning from his studies in a month. Can we hold a welcome banquet for him at the hotel?" I glanced at Leo in the corner and pressed my lips into a smile. "Of course. At the welcome banquet, I'll also have to make an announcement. I'll be handing the company over to Jasper." Nina's expression brightened. "Really?" I gave her a look. Nina seemed to realize she had overreacted and tempered her expression, but she still spoke in disbelief. "Mrs. Arya, are you really planning to abdicate?" I nodded slightly. Nina's smile grew even brighter. Just then Tyson returned from buying groceries. Seeing both Nina and me smiling, he asked, "Is there something to be happy about?" Nina immediately ran over to help carry the groceries, smiling brightly. "Tyson, President Wynne said she wants to step down and hand the company over to Jasper." Tyson was equally delighted. "Really?" They both smiled radiantly, their greed plainly visible in their eyes. In my previous life, when Nina and Tyson heard the same news, they looked exactly like this. At the time, I foolishly believed they were genuinely happy for Jasper. But it turned out to be a wolf that had been lying in wait for years, showing its ambition. I set the teacup down, a little heavier than before. Only then did the two of them come to their senses. Tyson chuckled awkwardly, came over and took my hand, his tone affectionate. "Wife, you are so good to Jasper." I smiled, curling my lips. "How do you mean that?" "Jasper is my child. If I'm not good to him, who would I be good to?" Nina covered her mouth and smiled. "Yes, Tyson, Jasper is Mrs. Arya's child, so of course Mrs. Arya will treat him well." I lifted my eyes slightly, with some worry, but Jasper just graduated. I'm afraid he might not yet have the ability to take over the company. How about I give it some more thought? As soon as the words fell, the two of them changed expressions drastically. Nina hurriedly said, No, Mrs. Arya, that won't happen. I will do my utmost to assist Jasper, he will certainly manage the company very well." Tyson panicked too. "Honey, you forgot, Jasper studied financial management. Besides, with Nina helping, Jasper will be fine." I hesitated. Tyson hurriedly took my hand. "These years, you and I barely had any time alone. Now Jasper is grown, you can finally rest a bit and spend some quality time with me." I frowned. "All right, I'll think about it some more." Nina was about to speak in annoyance, but Tyson beat her to it. "It's okay, honey. Whatever you decide is fine, I'll do whatever you say." Nina was unwilling, but also didn't dare to say anything. She rose and strode viciously toward Leo, slapping him several times. Leo cried out in pain. "Mom, I was wrong, please don't hit me anymore." Nina gave me a disdainful look and cursed, "You filthy bastard. Useless. Didn't I tell you to behave? Why are you barking like a dog here?" Having said that, she grabbed a vase nearby and smashed it down on Leo's head. In an instant, blood gushed out. For 20 years Nina had been like this. Whenever anything displeased her, Leo became her punching bag. Leo would come to me for help, looking at me with those pitiful eyes, but I felt not an ounce of compassion, rather, a sense of relief. In my past life, I must have pleaded at him like that too, but he still turned his back on affection and sent me and the child to a psychiatric hospital. Now I can only say one thing. Leo, don't resent your mother, she did it for your own good. Spare the rod and spoil the child, getting beaten is a normal occurrence. Leo closed his eyes in despair. But how could Nina end it like this? She grabbed Leo by the hair and began dragging him out. "I've always said you're an untamable dog. I won't let you live long enough to strike back. When the time comes, I'll make sure you suffer eternally." Those words were obviously about me. Yet in my previous life I didn't realize it. Tyson didn't say more, he went to cook, and I slung my bag and headed to the office. I was convinced there was more to come, some surprise. As soon as I got to the office, I took out my phone to check the surveillance footage. Nina swaggered right in, and she even tied Leo to the door with a rope. The two of them were in the living room, wrapped around each other, carrying on in broad daylight. And they called it thrilling. I felt sick and set my phone aside until the conversation began. Nina, Tyson, what if Arya suddenly changes her mind? Tyson toyed with her hair and laughed. How could that happen? Jasper dotes on her like she's the apple of his eye. Nina, but she said today she wanted to think it over. If she really backs out, wouldn't all our scheming have been for nothing? A hard, sinister flash crossed Tyson's eyes. If Arya really goes back on her word, then don't blame me for showing no mercy. I'll leave her with no place to bury herself. Nina held Tyson and laughed coyly. What hypocrites. I shut down the surveillance and had the company's assets transferred out. I'm the legal representative and the CEO, doing this was effortless. Didn't Nina and Tyson want the company? Fine by me, I'll give it to them. I handed Jasper's welcome banquet entirely over to Nina to handle. With her in charge, I didn't have to worry at all. Nina could do everything perfectly. But I hadn't expected her to be so extravagant. She even bought Jasper a sports car worth tens of millions. I raised an eyebrow slightly. This sports car, it's over budget, isn't it? But Nina didn't seem to care. Mrs. Arya, you've mentored me all these years, and I really like Jasper, so consider this my gift to him. Generous, indeed. But even if I paid Nina a high salary, she couldn't possibly have millions in savings. I know exactly where that money didn't come from. She actually dared to cook the books at the company. Nina, you really think you're going to live forever? Tyson came over too. Honey, look how good Nina is to Jasper. She's grateful. I pressed my lips into a smile, with a trace of sarcasm. Indeed, she's very grateful. Grateful enough to take everything from me with her own hands. Grateful enough to plot my murder. Who would want gratitude like that? Nina didn't notice my oddness and went back to arranging the banquet. Left with nothing to do, I planned to go home and rest. As soon as I opened the door, a bouquet was thrust into my face. The most beautiful mommy, are you surprised? Excited? Jasper popped out, his sunlit face full of smiles. I snorted with laughter. The kid actually came back early. Before, whenever Nina beat him, Jasper always looked hollow whenever I saw him, nothing like the bright, spirited look he has today. This time, I vowed to protect him, to keep him this happy. When Nina returned and saw Jasper, she'd be so shocked she wouldn't know what to do. She'd immediately grab his hand. Jasper, why didn't you tell me you were coming back? I could have picked you up. Since he was little, Jasper had a bit of an aversion to Nina, saying she was too cruel to Leo and that the way she looked at him felt wrong. Jasper hurriedly withdrew his hand. Aunt Nina, I wanted to surprise my mom, so I didn't tell anyone. Nina looked at the empty hand, her expression darkening a little, and her voice trembled. Jasper, do you really dislike Aunt Nina? Jasper said nothing. He stood beside me and looped his arm through mine, tacitly confirming Nina's words. Jasper, Nina pressed her lips together, tears gathering in her eyes. Jasper frowned, uncomfortable. I patted his hand. Go to the kitchen and help Mom get some milk. Knowing I was deliberately sending him away, Jasper immediately agreed. I looked at the distraught Nina and said displeased, Nina, with that look on your face, you're acting like you're Jasper's mother. Tyson's expression changed dramatically. He immediately stepped in front of Nina. Nina, what are you doing? The two of them exchanged some kind of look, whatever it was. In any case, Nina wiped away her tears and forced a few embarrassed laughs. Sorry, Mrs. Arya, I was being rude. At that moment, the sound of breaking bowls came from the kitchen. I was terrified and ran over at once. Nina and Tyson hurriedly followed. Jasper stared toward the corner. Leo, who had originally been locked outside, was now rummaging for food in the kitchen trash can. Leo's face was bruised and swollen, and his hair had never been cut since he was young. Seeing someone like that suddenly in the kitchen would indeed be frightening. Nina understood and, grabbing Leo by the hair, kicked him again and again. Are you a starving ghost reborn? How dare you scare my Jasper here, believe it or not, I'll beat you to death. Leo begged for mercy. Mom, I'm sorry, I was just too hungry. Please forgive me, I won't do it again. Staring at the trash in the bin, Nina shoved Leo's head right into it. Want to eat, huh? Then eat your fill. Leo couldn't make a sound, then tore himself away from Nina's grip, tears and snot streaming down his face. Mom. Am I even really your son? Why do you abuse me like this? Why are you so good to Jasper? He has his parents' love, why can't you love me even a little? Saying that, Leo sank to his knees, inconsolable. A man in his 20s, sobbing as if his heart would break, the sight was jarringly out of place. But Nina remained unmoved. She grabbed the rolling pin beside her and, with a flip of her wrist, started beating Leo mercilessly. Each strike landed hard, Leo could only shield his head with his hands, unable even to cry out for mercy. Nina kept hitting his legs, blow after blow, until a sickening crack of bone breaking echoed through the room. Only then did she stop and hiss a vicious warning. You lowly wretch, what right do you have to mention Jasper? This time I've broken your leg, let's see how you scare Jasper from now on. Leo could no longer make any sound. His pupils were wide, and for a long while not a single noise came from his mouth. In the end, he fainted from the pain. Jasper, did I scare you? Don't worry, Auntie only hates that beast. She would never treat you like that, rest assured, Auntie really likes you. Nina changed to a look of tender affection as she spoke, watching Jasper. Jasper stared at the fainted Leo on the ground, his brow tightly furrowed. Nina seemed to realize something, grabbed Leo's hand, dragged him out and threw him away, then came back with a smiling face. Scum like him should be tossed outside, so they won't offend Jasper's eyes. Jasper stayed by my side. No matter what Nina said, he didn't respond, there was even disgust in his eyes. Nina hurriedly explained, Jasper, are you afraid Auntie will treat you like that in the future? Don't worry, Auntie would never do that to you. Leo is lowly by fate, he deserves to die. Mom, I'm tired. I'm going to rest first. Jasper looked at me, then headed straight upstairs. Nina wanted to follow, but Tyson's expression went cold, his tone carrying a warning, Nina, tomorrow is Jasper's welcome banquet. Go check on the preparations, make sure nothing goes wrong. Nina watched Jasper reluctantly, leaving with dissatisfaction. Mentioning the welcome banquet made the corner of my mouth lift. I was looking forward to tomorrow too. Tyson had invited the dignitaries of all of City A, as if deliberately announcing something important. The whole event was being orchestrated by Tyson and Nina, I was merely there to mingle with the executives. After the host's opening remarks, Jasper gave a speech. When he finished, he had the lights shine on me, came down himself, and very gentlemanly escorted me up onto the stage. What I owe most gratitude to is my mother, Mrs. Arya. She gave me life, she gave me a life to live, and she is the one who made me who I am today. Jasper gave me a big hug. I saw Nina's face darken, a slight curl at the corner of her mouth, the show hadn't even started. After Jasper finished his speech and the host was about to announce the next item, Nina walked onto the stage and snatched the microphone from the host. Jasper, there's something I have to tell you today. Actually, you are my child. It was the nurse who swapped the babies back then. Mrs. Arya may have raised you, but the favor of raising is no match for the favor of birthing, which foster mother would truly be good to a child. In an instant, the scene erupted in uproar. So it turns out Nina is actually Master Jasper's birth mother. Doesn't that mean Mrs. Arya's decades of effort were for nothing? Impossible. Nina can't just say something and have it be true. Wouldn't Arya herself know whether it's her child? I feel like today's spectacle is some sort of plot. You can tell at a glance that Nina has ill intentions. Hearing the crowd, Nina pointed at Leo in the wheelchair. That one should be Mrs. Arya's child. Then she took a paternity test report from her bag and handed it to the host. Host, please read the results aloud. The host glanced at it, looking somewhat hesitant, and lowered his voice to ask, Nina, do you really want me to read it? Nina was a little displeased. Read it confidently, read it loudly, and make sure this truth is made public so everyone can witness it for me. The host exhaled, turned the microphone up to its highest volume. The paternity test results show that Miss Nina and young Master Jasper, the percentage of a blood relationship, is 0. The last 2 words were noticeably suppressed by the host. He glanced at Nina somewhat timidly. The smile on Nina's face froze instantly, incredulous. What did you say? She snatched the paternity report, and when she saw the trailing 0 she was stunned. Flipping back through the names, her complexion changed drastically. How could there be no blood relation? Tyson didn't believe it. He took a few quick steps forward, and when he saw clearly his face darkened. He slapped it across Nina's face. Is this the result you were talking about? Nina couldn't make sense of it either. She stared fixedly at the host. Did you do something to it? The host frowned. Nina, I stood right here the whole time, and you were the one who gave me the paternity test. How could I have tampered with it? Nina bit her lip and looked at me again. Arya, did you know I was going to announce this today, so you colluded with the hospital ahead of time and deliberately altered the blood relationship between me and Jasper? I looked up and countered, you say you announced this today on purpose. Are you saying you knew the 2 children had been swapped all along, deliberately? Nina's expression went flustered. Oh, how could that be? I pursed my lips and smiled, my expression calm. Tyson watched Nina coldly. Nina grew a little scared, then, as if remembering something, ran down from the stage and pushed Leo over. Arya, Jasper is really my child, Leo is yours, you can't possibly refuse to recognize your own flesh and blood, can you? Leo already had a broken leg. When he heard that, his face brightened and he looked at me expectantly. I glanced at Leo and did not respond. Nina pounced as if she'd caught me in a lie. Arya, look, this kid's brow is just like Tyson's. He must be your child. I had noticed it too. Over the years Leo was always battered and bruised. Today, though marked with purple wounds, he had been cleaned up spotless. Between his brows, he really did resemble Tyson. But isn't Leo also Nina and Tyson's child? Isn't Tyson perfectly normal too? Everyone looked closely, sighing. This person really does look a lot like Arya's husband. Could he actually be Arya's child? If they can look alike, there must be a blood relationship. I think Arya is out of luck this time. The company has effectively been passed to Jasper. This is making a wedding dress for someone else. But Arya seems unwilling to acknowledge that child. Everyone turned to look at me. I pressed my lips together. Leo isn't even my child, how could I possibly acknowledge him? Still, the truth is being revealed today. Can Nina and Tyson accept it? I'm actually looking forward to it. For now, let the 2 clowns prance around a bit. Tyson came over with a sorrowful expression. Honey, Leo really is our child. Back then, he really was switched. Nina, on the other hand, was full of smugness. Exactly, Arya, blood ties can't be erased. Even if you refuse to accept Leo, it doesn't change that he's your child. Jasper kept frowning, took the microphone from the host beside him and shouted, I, Jasper, have only one mother in this life, and that is Ms. Arya. No one else, don't try to cozy up to me. Those words were said by Jasper while looking at Nina. Everyone knew exactly who they were aimed at. Nina's face immediately darkened. Jasper, what nonsense are you talking? I am your birth mother. I've just made it very clear, my mother is only Arya. Jasper's expression turned cold. Nina felt deflated, her eyes reddened. Jasper, do you know how much that hurts me? I carried you for 10 months and gave birth to you through hardship. Jasper walked up beside me, refusing even to look at Nina. Nina was heartbroken, and Tyson began his divine assist again, speaking with great reluctance. Jasper, if Nina really is your mother, you can't disown her. I've taught you since you were little to know how to be grateful. I raised you for over 20 years, of course I'm attached to you, but blood ties are obvious, there's no way I could deny it. Tyson spoke as if he'd been struck by something, his voice weak and listless, and I couldn't help but admire his acting. Leo stared at me desperately. Mom, will you accept me? I'll behave, I'll do lots of things, I won't make you worry. I glanced at Leo, his eyes were full of pleading, but he drew no scrap of pity from me. Nina began to perform again. Arya, look how much this child wants to be reunited with you. In this world, what mother wouldn't ache for her child? The others chimed in. That's true. Even if the child is disabled, Arya should take him back. Arya has money, take him to get treatment, maybe he could even get better. Arya is a force to be reckoned with. If she weren't ruthless, how could a woman have navigated the business world for so many years? As for me, Arya would never acknowledge that child. But still, she's her biological child. You can't just leave it be, can you? Nina looked at me provocatively, it was clear she was deliberately using everyone to press me down. Not a bad strategist. But this time, Nina, one misstep and everything goes wrong. In this life, you'll never recover. When I didn't respond, Tyson grabbed my hand again, his eyes were red and his voice shook. Honey, if Leo really is our child, we can't sit back and do nothing. We have to get him treated. Even if it costs us everything, we must do it. I yanked my hand free from Tyson's grip, my voice steady, Leo, he's not my child. Tyson stared at me in shock, his expression mixed, a touch of disappointment in his voice. Honey, how can you be so heartless? That's our child. Nina clicked her tongue a few times. Arya, you're the CEO of the IN Group, how can you even disdain your own child? If this gets out, won't you be the laughingstock? Mom, how could you not acknowledge me? I've been so obedient, and besides, you treat Jasper so well, why won't you recognize me, your own son? Leo roared, then coughed violently, looking at me with defeat. That look, just like the one I saw him give me in a past life. But does a look mean anything? I scoffed coldly and gave no answer to any of them. There was always someone more anxious than me. Nina ran over, staring at me in disbelief. Arya, do you really not recognize Leo? Can you bear to see your son living like this? I didn't even glance at Leo. I picked up the red wine beside me and took a sip. As I've said before, he's not my child, why should I acknowledge him? Tyson shook his head helplessly, utterly disappointed in me. His voice choked as he climbed the stage. Everyone says I'm a freeloader, living off women, I won't deny that. I love Arya very much, and I'm willing to stay home and take care of things so she can focus on the company. But I can't accept Arya's actions today. Leo is indeed our child, and she actually won't acknowledge him. My child has suffered enough over the years. Now even his biological parents don't want him, how miserable must he feel? Tyson drew a breath, as if steeling himself. Today, I hereby announce that I'm divorcing Arya. From now on, everything about Arya has nothing to do with me. Having said that, Tyson, in front of everyone, called his lawyer to prepare the divorce papers. I quietly watched the two of them put on a show. Once the divorce papers were signed, all the truth should come to light. In less than 20 minutes, the divorce papers arrived, clearly something Tyson had prepared in advance. Tyson continued to speak of his feelings for me and his quiet sacrifices over the years, then handed the divorce agreement to me. Arya, from now on, you and I are no longer connected. I hesitated for nothing and signed at once, not glancing at the contents at all. As far as I was concerned, Tyson couldn't get any benefit. After all, I'd already transferred all my assets to Jasper, I was just an empty figurehead, not a single penny left to my name. Tyson was a little shocked at how readily I agreed, but he couldn't wait to snatch back the divorce papers, a sly joy in his eyes. The crowd's mood had been stirred up by Nina and Tyson, and they all looked at me angrily now, thinking I was heartless. I walked onto the stage with calm composure, a smile tugging at my lips. I also have a paternity test here. Would any of you like to take a look? The host was still standing to one side, I handed over the result. Please read this for me. The host glanced at the result, then looked at me in shock. I stepped aside to give up the center position. The host walked over and, as before, turned the volume all the way up. The paternity test results show that Arya and Jasper have a percentage of genetic relatedness, 100. Everyone's eyes widened, faces filled with disbelief. Jasper breathed a sigh of relief and came over to hug me. "Mom, I just knew I had to be your son." Those words were undoubtedly like a knife to Nina's chest. Nina hurried over. "Jasper, I told you, I'm your biological mother. As for that paternity test, it must have been forged." Those words carried not a shred of conviction. I hadn't expected Nina to be so foolish, and I couldn't quite understand how, in my past life, the two of them had managed to harm me so thoroughly. Nina looked at me and snarled, "On the day of the delivery, I was the one who swapped the two babies myself. Jasper is my child." The moment those words left her mouth, everyone was stunned again. I hadn't expected Nina to admit it either, but when a rabbit is cornered it will bite, let alone a creature with the heart of a wolf and the conscience of a dog. Tyson looked at me with provocation, flicking the divorce papers in his hand as if to tell me we were done. I smiled calmly. If it weren't for today, I would have long since wanted nothing to do with Tyson. Under the horrified gazes of the crowd, I spoke slowly. "You did switch the children." Nina sneered. "So Jasper is my child." "Arya, no matter how you argue, it's useless now." To prove her point, Nina even took out her phone and cast it to the big screen. In the footage, Nina had indeed swapped my child. Nina lifted her chin slightly, a smug smile playing at the corner of her mouth. The crowd looked at me with mixed expressions, some pity, some mockery. It seems Jasper is Nina's child after all. Poor Arya, she worked so hard to raise a capable child, and now she's going to lose him. Humph, Arya is ruthless. Look how she doesn't even acknowledge her own child. A woman like that deserves to get what's coming to her. Don't rush to a verdict yet. I don't see Arya showing the slightest fear. There's probably another twist to this. Everyone looked at me. I turned to Nina and said calmly, "You're right, you did swap the babies. But how do you know the one you took is definitely mine?" I had also hidden a video on my phone. Now, of course, it was time to let the truth be known. I cast it onto the big screen, first, footage of me quietly taking Nina's baby, then, immediately after, Nina tiptoeing in to swap the babies. This video is not hard to understand. I first took Nina's child away, then Nina came back and took him again, back and forth fussing, and finally everything returned to the proper course. Nina widened her eyes. "You swapped the child earlier?" "Then Leo." She couldn't finish her sentence, tears slid down from the corners of her eyes. "Yes, Leo is your child." I smiled and picked up Nina's words. Nina opened her mouth wide, unable to utter a single word for a long while. It was Leo, however, who burst into loud laughter. "Ha ha, my biological mother thought I wasn't her child all these years, abused me to her heart's content, didn't treat me like a person. Now that you know I'm her child, so what if she regrets it? My leg is broken and that's that, the harm I've suffered over the years can't be made up by anything. Ha ha ha, it's utterly ironic." Leo kept laughing, and finally rolled off the wheelchair, pounding the floor again and again, laughing without stop. He had gone mad. Nina kept repeating "impossible," while Tyson's expression turned fierce. "Arya, I underestimated you. But even if you swapped the child earlier, so what? This divorce settlement says I get 2/3 of your assets." Saying that, Tyson grew confident again. I didn't deny it. "Then go divide them. After all, there's no money anyway." My calm, offhand words made Tyson sense that something was wrong. He flipped through the contract again, as if confirming something, and when he understood it finally, he smiled once more. "The agreement is very clear. This was drafted by the lawyer I hired and has legal effect. Arya, you can't weasel out of it." I shrugged indifferently. I never intended to weasel out. If you want to split the assets, go ahead and split them, but whether you can actually get any is another matter. Tyson wasn't an idiot either. He grabbed Nina immediately. I asked you to calculate the family's assets, did you do it? Nina's thoughts were entirely on Leo now. She wanted to run and hug him, but she didn't dare. Nina. Tyson slapped her across the face, and only then did she come back to herself, tears streaming down without stop. Tyson, how could Leo be our child? The way I've treated him before, what will happen to him now? Tyson clenched his fists, his gaze hard. Nina, I'm asking you, have the family's assets been calculated? They've been calculated. Little Lee just told me he'll arrive in 10 minutes. Nina spoke absent-mindedly. At that, Tyson finally let out a breath of relief. Nina ran over and crouched beside Leo, her voice trembling. Baby, it's my fault. Will you forgive Mommy? Your leg can be healed, Mommy will do everything she can to get you treated. But Leo's expression was vacant, he kept grinning foolishly. Any clear-eyed person could see he was mentally unwell. I sneered. Nina, you abused your own son and drove him mad, this is the punishment you deserve. Looking at Tyson at my side, I sent all the evidence in my hands to the lawyer and told him to call the police immediately. It included proof of Tyson and Nina conspiring to harm me, and evidence of Nina's years of falsified accounts. Tyson and Nina will both have to pay the price. 10 minutes later, Shelley came over with the asset accounting sheet. Tyson snatched it, and the more he read, the darker his face grew. By the end, his expression was so gloomed it seemed it could drip. Arya. How could incorporation possibly have not a single cent? What on earth did you do? I raised an eyebrow slightly. Didn't I say before? I'm transferring the company to Jasper. I've already withdrawn from incorporation, I'm broke now. How is that possible? Arya, how could you know my plan? Did someone tell you? Tyson, stunned, glared venomously at Nina. In his eyes, only he and Nina knew the plan, since he couldn't have told Arya, that left only Nina. Nina sensed something was wrong too and scrambled to her feet. Tyson, I couldn't have told Arya. You know I hate her too. But Tyson wouldn't listen. He lunged forward, grabbed Nina by the throat, and snarled through his teeth, Nina, you betrayed me. Otherwise how could Arya know my plan? You ruined everything for me. I'll kill you. Tyson went mad, no one nearby dared to intervene, everyone kept far away. Nina looked at me, trying to get me to save her. But how could I possibly save her? Tyson had a tight grip on Nina, his strength immense, she had no chance to break free, not until her breath ceased. Tyson dumped Nina on the ground and kicked her several times. Bitch. It's because of you that I have nothing. Then Tyson, his eyes bloodshot, looked at me. And you, Arya. Who gave you the right to look down on everyone? Women should stay at home, tend to their husbands and teach the children, why are you stepping on my head? Why should I serve you? Arya, you're the one who deserves to die. Tyson lunged at me, Jasper immediately put himself between us and kicked Tyson away. Don't anyone hurt my mom. Tyson was kicked to the ground, glared at the bottle of red wine beside him, and smashed it in his hand. You little bastard, how dare you hit me? I should have thrown you into the river to drown back then. But it's not too late, kill you and Arya, and all the assets will be mine. Tyson charged at us again. I stepped in front of Jasper. In this world, I must protect my child. But I had forgotten, my child has grown up, he can stand on his own, and he has the ability to protect his mother. Jasper smashed a chair over Tyson's head, and Tyson collapsed unconscious to the ground. At that moment the front door opened and the police came in to arrest Tyson. Tyson had killed Nina and had deliberately tried to murder me. Now that he had committed violence in public, he surely deserved the death penalty. I looked at Jasper and smiled knowingly. For the rest of my life, peace returned, the road ahead was filled with the light of hope.